Hello and welcome to this deep dive we've put together for you. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and sources on, well, the tricky nature of success. Looking through it all, one big question really jumps out, doesn't it?
It really does.
Is achieving our goals mostly down to outside factors, what we often just call luck? Or are there maybe deeper internal drivers at play, things we don't always see?
That's the core question, yeah. And looking at the sources you sent over, the focus definitely shifts towards that second possibility. The main argument seems to be that what often looks like chance or good fortune is, in many cases, actually the result of well-developed emotional intelligence being used strategically.
Exactly. And to really get that, we need a clear definition of emotional intelligence, right?
Hmm.
Based on the material we looked at, it's defined as the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and importantly, the emotions of others too.
Right. And Daniel Goleman comes up a lot in the sources, a key figure in popularizing this concept.
He is. His work's been crucial. He broke EI down into 5 main areas, which we should definitely explore.
Yeah, let's do that. We're talking about self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills. These are like the hidden engine, you could say, behind the success we often see but maybe don't fully understand.
Okay, let's dig into that. Starting with this common idea of luck. The sources seem to challenge whether that's really the main story behind big achievements. What's their take?
Well, they argue pretty strongly that blaming success on luck often just masks this underlying, well-practiced emotional intelligence. When we see someone handle a tough situation calmly or build strong relationships or just navigate change smoothly, it's easy to just say, oh, they got lucky.
But the reality, according to this material, is a bit different. Can you give us some concrete examples of how this emotional intelligence shows up in ways we might mistake for luck?
Sure. Someone with high EI might respond to uncertainty in a really balanced way, right? Allowing them to make thoughtful decisions when things are unclear. That looks calm, maybe lucky,
Right.
but it's regulation. They also tend to be good at building relationships based on trust and respect, which naturally opens doors to opportunities. Again, seems like luck, but it's social skill.
Okay, makes sense.
And there's the ability to accurately read a situation, understand the dynamics between key people that gives them a strategic edge. And finally, there's this quiet resilience, this inner strength that lets them learn from mistakes and keep going, not get bogged down by frustration.
It's really clarifying how those things could easily just be glossed over as good fortune. The sources stress that while EI isn't some magic bullet for instant success, it definitely boosts the odds, makes success more sustainable, and importantly, keeps it human. For listeners wanting to grasp these mechanisms, it means cultivating these inner skills might be way more impactful than they thought.
Exactly. And that leads us right into another key point, the whole EI versus IQ thing. Traditionally, IQ's been seen as the big predictor of academic and professional success. What do the sources say about that?
Yeah, the material points out that historical focus on IQ, but it offers a different perspective, doesn't it? It argues that EI might actually be a better predictor in really key areas, especially now when being adaptable and quick thinking is so vital.
That's right. EI seems to be a stronger indicator for things like leadership performance, how well people adapt to constantly changing environments, their ability to influence and inspire others, to connect. It even seems to correlate more strongly with overall well-being and life satisfaction than IQ alone.
It's quite telling that the text mentions huge global companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, starting to build EI assessments into their hiring and talent development. That signals a real shift, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
It's not just about what someone knows anymore, but more about how they apply that knowledge in real, often stressful situations. For our listeners, that really underlines the importance of not just gathering information, but developing how you actually use it.
Precisely. These companies get it. Technical skills matter, of course, but how people manage their feelings, work with others, lead teams, that's just as critical, maybe even more so, for getting things done and keeping the workplace positive and productive.
Okay, so this raises a crucial question for anyone listening.
Hmm.
How can we actually develop our own emotional intelligence? The material you shared has a whole section on goals or strategies for doing just that.
Yes, and the good news is EI isn't some fixed trait you're born with. It's a set of skills you can definitely cultivate and strengthen over time with conscious effort. The text gives us specific strategies for each of Goleman's 5 dimensions.
Great, let's start with self-awareness. What practices does the material suggest for getting to know ourselves better?
For self-awareness, the text recommends things like regular reflective writing, maybe keeping an emotional journal to explore feelings and what triggers them. It also suggests trying to spot your own recurring thought patterns and automatic reactions. And finally, using self-assessment tools is mentioned. Things like specific EI tests or even the Enneagram, which can offer insights into personality and emotional tendencies. For listeners, maybe just tracking reactions could reveal some valuable patterns.
Moving on to self-regulation, that ability to manage our emotions effectively. What strategies are proposed there?
For self-regulation, the big emphasis is on learning to pause before reacting impulsively to strong emotions. Bringing in mindfulness practices can help us observe feelings without judgment and respond more consciously.
Right, creating that space.
Exactly. And also establishing routines for emotional self-care, things like getting enough rest, regular exercise, finding moments of quiet reflection that's seen as fundamental for maintaining long-term emotional balance. For your own well-being, integrating these pauses can make a real difference.
The third dimension is internal motivation, that inner drive towards meaningful goals. How can we cultivate that, according to the text?
To boost internal motivation, the text highlights defining personal and professional purposes that go beyond just external rewards like praise or money. It advises celebrating progress and small wins, not just focusing on the final outcome.
That makes sense.
And crucially, learning to reframe mistakes and setbacks, seeing them not as defeats but as valuable chances to learn and grow. For anyone pursuing goals, that perspective shift can really fuel perseverance.
Empathy, the ability to understand others' emotions, is another key piece.
Yeah.
What practices help develop that?
To grow empathy, the text stresses practicing active listening, really paying full attention to what someone's saying, both verbally and nonverbally, without interrupting or judging. Also, training yourself to read nonverbal cues, facial expressions, tone of voice can give you valuable insights into someone else's emotional state. And finally, actively engaging with diverse environments and people from different backgrounds helps broaden our understanding of others' emotional worlds. For your own interactions, that deeper understanding can really strengthen bonds.
And that brings us to the fifth dimension, social skills, vital for building relationships and navigating the social world. What's the advice for improving those?
For social skills, the text recommends learning how to give and receive constructive feedback effectively. It also highlights developing skills for collaborative conflict resolution, finding win-win solutions.
Important stuff.
Definitely. And finally, building and maintaining strong emotional support networks based on trust, respect, and reciprocity. For personal and professional growth, these skills are just fundamental.
Looking at all these dimensions and strategies, it becomes pretty clear that emotional intelligence is dynamic and adaptable, not some fixed, unchangeable trait.
Absolutely. And the conclusion the material offers is quite powerful. What we often chalk up to chance is frequently the result of consistent, quiet, deep inner work focused on developing our emotional intelligence. In a world that's increasingly automated and competitive, this kind of intelligence isn't just a nice to have, it's a strategic necessity for thriving.
The text reminds us that people who invest in their EI are more likely to become authentic, effective leaders, valuable team players, resilient professionals who can handle challenges, and ultimately, individuals living richer, more satisfying lives.
And that's exactly the thought the material leaves us with, sort of posing a question for reflection. The next time you see someone achieving significant goals, should you just attribute it to luck? Or perhaps are you actually witnessing cultivated emotional intelligence in action? It's an invitation, really, to look beyond the surface and recognize the transformative power of that silent engine within each of us.